Graham is a special community. Discover Graham with Dorman is a series designed to tell the stories of the people who make Graham so special. Dorman Holub retired from preaching in 2021 and has since been declared as the official City of Graham and Young County historian. He dedicated his life and continues to dedicate his life to researching, learning, and sharing the history of Graham, Texas, and Young County. The third episode of Discover Graham with Dorman features Miss Mary Pitcock. Miss Pitcock has a charm and poise about her that will warm any heart. Plus, she always keeps the house stocked with sweet treats for her family. Thank you for watching, and please enjoy Mary Pitcock, an example of class, dignity, and love.
Mary, did your grandparents play an influence in your life as a young child?
Enormously. My paternal grandparents lived across the alley, our lots adjoined, and I discovered early in my life that if I went over very early when I first waked up and got dressed, I could eat breakfast with them that would include pancakes for sure, and come back in time to join my family for a more balanced meal, I'll say. I'm the only one of the 5 children who are here, of course. And Louis and I married in 1949 and have been here ever since. You know, as I look back on it, I was very shy in my very early days. And leaving Graham and going to Washington was like night and day because I knew everyone. I had been born and reared with my whole classmates. When I got to Washington, I knew no one, and I talked funny. So that early on, I learned that when I put my hand up to answer a question, everyone else put his down because they liked to hear me talk. They thought I talked so funny. It was exciting. I was taken on the floor of Congress when Daddy was first there, and usually was in the gallery pretty often when Congress was in session. We were invited to wonderful things. When Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs came out, we were invited to the White House to meet the Disney clan were there, and Mrs. Roosevelt greeted us, and I was holding my brother Bill's hand, and Mother had said, be sure he does not say, hi, Mrs. Roosevelt, that hello, and he'd made it. I was proud of him. I was 10. No, I was 8. It was very exciting, and I think it made a very deep impression on my life that my father early on, one of my earliest remembrances, he explained to me, he said, Mary, we are all here on this earth to do the best we can and to serve others. And he said, recognize that you are living like, because I love fish and had a fishbowl. He said, it's like living in that fishbowl. Everything that you do will be seen and evaluated. And most of all, God knows.
That's good advice.
And it has served me well. Daddy, after his defeat, he was appointed by President Roosevelt to condemn all the land in the Texarkana region, which became the Lone Star Ammunition and Red River Depot for World War II. And so I worked over there every summer. And then I went to what was then TSCW, Texas State College for Women. I was 16 when I entered and 19 when I graduated. And it was an exciting time to be in college because, of course, WW2 was on. And I remember being a counselor in Sayers Hall when my roommate and I heard President Roosevelt come on and say we were at war, that Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. And of course, all over my dormitory, I shall always remember, just as you remember when Kennedy was assassinated or whatever other significant events, girls were screaming. And I can remember we were called in to start calming everybody down. And one of the things that this friend has reflected on through the years that she was ready to pack and go home that night. And I said, no, please don't think about doing that. She said, how do you know what to do? I said, I know my father would be very upset at me to come home in December when I did not have credit for this semester of college. I graduated in August of 1945, and Dr. Baker and who was Edgar, was superintendent of the Orange Public Schools that were paying the highest salaries in Texas, which I had carefully researched. And surely enough, they came to our campus and offered me a position in the language arts department, and I accepted it and went to Orange, Texas. And of course, the war was still on. There was a shipyard down there, a naval base. I had 158 language arts seventh graders, of which 5 had parent had ever gotten that far before. And of course, you know, when you first graduate from college, you want life to be perfect. And I was appalled at their grammar. And so I started a little class afterwards that I was going to upgrade their grammar. And it ended rather abruptly because I sent Joe Thibodeau to find his good friend Arturo Medina because he was not there. And he came back and he said, Miss McFarland, I can't hardly see where he could have went to. And I thought, that you cannot make more grammatical errors in one sentence. Louis, I think back on 72 years of marriage, was remarkable. He went far and beyond because we know marriage is caring about somebody else more than yourself. And he certainly exemplified that. He went above and beyond. The years I taught, I marvel and look back at how much he did and how much responsibility he took on. Well, it's a wonderful story. His family moved to Graham in 1938, I guess, the fall. And we met at church at NYF, the Methodist Youth Fellowship. And one of our first dates, I guess you would say, we were delivering some food to a family in need. And on the way home, he said, someday I want to marry you. And I said, well, we've got a few things ahead of us first. I guess we were 15 then. And 10 years later, we did marry. But he and I graduated, we were in the same class, and just a few months difference in our ages. And we were very blessed. He came from a very warm and loving family, and we had the same values, clearly. I look back, and he was a lot of fun. He had very high standards, and I remember I was society editor of the newspaper our senior year, and at that point, Belvania was a hangout over in Stevens County that a lot of people went over and danced and drank, and I thought I should go over there. And I can remember saying, Louis said, no, I'm not taking you over there, and we are not going over there. And we didn't. And
you're better off for it.
I'm better for it. That's true. My father was very much a teetotaler, and I did not drink either. And I was, in fact, in Washington, working at the Library of Congress, and in charge of getting ready to entertain all of the air attaches of the embassies. Boeing had underwritten this party, and the Librarian of Congress was a Texan, and Luther Evans, and I said, I need, his assistant and I were best friends, and I said, I need help with this menu because I said, I do not drink and I do not know what would be a wise thing to do. And Luther Evans quickly replied, he said, in Washington, D.C., too much drinking is done, and you need to prepare to serve all of these things. I said, well, I don't drink. He said, just walk around with club soda or branch water in your hand and put a lemon slice in it and you'll be fine. And it worked perfectly for me. He had a very rare spirit of not only service and serving other people, he actually did it. The spirit of being lucky enough to have been reared in Graham, and but Lewis's parents were remarkable people too, and their legacy, I think, in Lewis is something that is part of my treasure. And when you think of all the people who have influenced your life, Lewis Sr. and Medora were certainly two who did.
Absolutely.
Lewis used to laugh that he said, I know one reason you married me was my mother. And I said, that's exactly right.
That's funny. This Graham connection that we always talk about. And I think about that a lot. And part of it just is because of the pride that we have in the community, that's the first thing we tell people. Like, how are you doing? Well, I'm Justin Pitcock, I'm from Graham, Texas. And that kind of, wanting to touch as many people as possible is, and keeping the memory alive, I think.
I think too, because I think people in Graham have traveled so much, and as Lewis and I traveled more and more, we marveled at the Graham connection.
Nana is the role model for so many people, but certainly for all of us on how, what that means about fellowship and family, bringing people around the table, and right across the street and across the other street, that's where Pa's brothers live, and so the Pitcock family is bigger than just us, and that meant the table was, the Thanksgivings we used to have across the street, there were 60 or 70 of us.
Oh, there were so many. And the doors were open for not just family. There were
I always
lots
loved
of
it when
friends.
Meryl said, I love it when they bring in the second turkey.
That's right. Yeah.
We are very close family. We did lots of family dinners together. It was not unusual to have, one or two meals during the week that Nana and Pa would be there, either at my parents' house or at Nana and Pa's house. Oftentimes we would, even come to Nana and Pa's house for dessert, for example, or Nana always had treats. So we knew where to go for strawberries and powdered sugar. Even growing up, we knew that this was a safe place to be. It was always, Nana knew exactly what would be fun.
One of my favorite stories, and I probably shouldn't say this, and all good stories start with that, but I like butter. Who doesn't like butter? And she let me eat like a stick of butter once, just straight up. And I wasn't sad about it. I still remember that fondly, as a matter of fact.
I love Moran's story when I always kept candy in a candy dish in the den, but I heard Moran say, the best candy is up in Pa's bedside table. Mm-hmm. And it was. He preferred Godiva or Russell Stover, and I usually bought Snickers downstairs. I am such a fortunate person in that I grew up in a family that believed in God and His Son Jesus Christ, and at no time in my life have I really ever felt forsaken because of that. And I think so many things happened as I grew up. My mother's death was a good example that I knew God was in charge. And the church here and in Washington, the whole community, my whole world responded to my loss in such a way I'll never forget. I think my faith in all the loss that you experience in death, you concentrate on the wonderful things that your faith has brought you. And certainly through the years, it has sustained me. Faith can sometimes be summed up in recognizing that God gives us promise, gives us choices, and the choices have consequences. So we need to learn to choose wisely. And I think that was instilled in me early in my life. And I think it had a lot to do with the decisions I made. I think I knew I was going to marry Lewis eventually, though, as he used to love to remind me that I considered 5 other people. And I knew.
You chose wisely? Huh? And you chose wisely?
I chose wisely. I chose wisely. And I think faith is such an indispensable, I wonder people who do not have that faith, how they live. Because I think every day, and certainly in this present day, so many things happen and we have such instant communication about it that you know at once the bad news, whether you ever learn the good news or not. And that if you do not have faith, how in the world do you live?
Our family is the same central story of our faith, which is, the Bible describes what God is like, and most of that, all of that, is love. And that's what we saw, from the very beginning. We were brought into this loving family, and like Nana was saying, not having your faith was never shaken, or maybe it was challenged but not shaken. And for me, I have a similar experience, and that's because we already knew love. Like, where else are you going to go? That's the only place you need to be.
Well, but what about you, Mary Ellen?
The unconditional love that the whole family has always shown is, just a given. And that all circles back to our service to others and being comfortable sharing our faith.
You think about back to the expect the best in people all the time, and not just us to others, but Pa and Nana would always take you as you are for that day, because each day is new, and when someone presents themselves in front of you, like, that's the only thing that's going on. You don't need all this baggage.
Yes.
And that changes the world when you can just take people at face value right then. One of the traditions that Nana and Pa had for a long time was inviting hundreds of people to the country club for breakfast on Christmas Day, right? Or was it?
Well, we started on Christmas Eve, but and then it was Christmas Day.
But most of that, during my early years, they took a hiatus, and then when it was 2012-ish, we did it again, and everyone was telling all these stories. But all that to say is, I didn't even really know that tradition existed, but that is just one example of like trying to project this love everywhere that you can.
What she has meant to my daughters, without direct teaching, it's her influence over them has just been incredible to watch.
We often, everyone in the family has this kind of in the back of their mind in any situation. They're like, well, what would Nana say? What would Nana do?
What would Nana do?
And we have like Nana-isms. Like there's the way that everyone says, an unpleasant thing that happened, but the right way to say it is however Nana would say it. Mm-hmm. And when I think about the simple way to say it is words mean things, right? Which is to say choosing your language and being very specific in what you mean. And this goes back to, my writing. Just speaking to someone else is always those words that are coming out. Like, you need to think about each one of them because they make an impact. And so that, not just it's an attitude, right? It comes out in words, but it's a positioning where, we expect the best of people and realize that, sometimes we're going to see the worst, but we should always expect the best.
One of the legacies I think that many people in Graham and further know our grandmother for is remember who and whose you are. My children have heard that thousands of times. When you leave the house, remember who and whose you are. Make good decisions, because it reflects back not only on you, but your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your extended family.
And that phrase encapsulates, like, you always knew there were a lot of people for you.
Yes, yeah,
You know?
yes, and that's
There's
the
a
other
vested
side of
interest
that,
in
yes.
what you're up to at any given
And what
time.
you're doing.
We're there for you. My father would say that, and Louis was very big on that. Remember who and whose you are.
Yes.
And I think that sums up so much. And I marvel at parents now and the challenges that they have, and the children. I have a remarkable great-granddaughter who'll graduate from high school this spring. And she's just everything you would be proud of. But the choices that are open to young people today are so different from the class of 41. Stay as close to God as you can and show His love to others. Love each other.
Yes.